Do you want to set your child up for success? Is your child struggling with a specific subject or need help with homework? Is your child asking questions on their homework you don't feel equipped to answer? IXL Learning is an online learning program for kids. It covers math, language arts, science, and social studies. IXL is designed to help them really understand and master topics in a fun way with positive feedback. I mean, with Eliza, she really could have used something like IXL because it would have helped her to get up to speed and stay up with her class in math, which just did not come easily to her.
Don't miss out. 1 in 4 students in the U.S. are learning with IXL. IXL is used in 95 of the top 100 school districts in the U.S. Make an impact on your child's learning. Get IXL now. And Happier listeners can get an exclusive 20% off IXL membership when they sign up today at IXL.com/happier. Visit IXL.com/happier to get the most effective learning program out there at the best price. Are you trying to figure out what to eat for dinner yet again? With Knorr's sides and bouillon, you can whip up delicious and nutritious weeknight dinners in no time.
Yes, I am the biggest fan of Knorr bouillon and of Knorr taste combos. Knorr taste combos are a menu of delicious, affordable, and well-balanced meals that you can prepare at home in 30 minutes or less. Knorr is the not-so-secret ingredient from its bouillon to its rice and pasta sides that brings major flavor to delicious home-cooked meals. Visit Knorr.com to make your own delicious taste combo. It's not fast food, but it's so good. Hello, we're here for More Happier, a podcast where we get more happier. Hey, Elizabeth.
Hi, Gretch.
Today we are revisiting some of our best back-to-school hacks from over the years and sharing them with you. Yeah, it's that time of year when everybody is getting back to school. For me, this back-to-school period is looking different these years now that Eleanor is in college, but there is still a lot to do to get ready.
Yeah, Gretchen, I'm proud of myself because I ordered all of Jack's school books, which is one of those tasks that I dread every single year.
Yeah. Well, as we often say, September is the other new year because the long days of summer turn into the routine of work and school and everything becomes just more intense. And I think that it often feels stressful to make this transition. What do you think, Elizabeth?
Oh, yeah, for sure. It just feels like there's so much to do and you don't really remember your school routine. Every year, it's like, what time do we have to get up in the morning? What time do we have to leave for school?
Right.
So it's making everything sink again.
Yes, yeah. But first, let's revisit some favorite listener traditions for embracing September as the other new year. And now for a deep dive, we asked listeners for the traditions that they have related to September as the other new year, because for many of us, the end of the summer is the other new year. And people have a lot of ways of marking the end of summer and the return to school routine, work routine, whether or not it's the summer for you, depending on where you live in the world, but that's the feeling of the return to ordinary routine.
Yes, so let's go through these. Benet says, speaking of school supplies, Gretchen, school supplies or office supplies, art supplies, just something fresh for my creativity collection.
This is wonderful from a teacher. Mandy says, my students come back to school this week, so I always get New Year's hats and horns. Happy new school year. That's fun, thinking about the new school year as New Year. I love that.
Tiffany said, our school starts middle of August, so I use those 2 weeks as a testing/experimenting ground for new schedules and routines. I find out what works and what doesn't, so when September hits, we are running smoothly.
That's a good idea. Erin says, September is my new year working at a university. Something I started when I returned to in-person work was to get a plant for my office windowsill at the start of every year. I'd like to add one each year, at least for a while. I also like to get a new outfit, kind of a throwback to when I was a kid. I love that. New outfit, new plant.
Yeah. Jamie says, we go to the same little town on Lake Michigan every Labor Day. The first part of vacation, there are lots of tourists. The second part, the town is a ghost town. We've been going several years, so it's a known place. No new planning needed. It's comfortable. It's the perfect way to end summer for us. And because I work at a university, end of August/beginning of September definitely marks a new year for me.
Jennifer said, with the start of the school year and Rosh Hashanah, which is the Jewish New Year, it's our time for introspection and making plans, not around January 1st, always in the fall. I think a lot of people feel that way.
Absolutely. Jennifer says, cars get a good deep clean from the summer sand and fun right before school starts. Gretch Sasterling says, resume my outdoor morning walks.
Oh, that's great. Rhea says, start writing in a new diary.
Allison says, my ritual is to get my hair cut.
That's a good one. And then finally, John says, try to get a good night's sleep. It will be the last time until Christmas break. Okay. It's like,
oh, yes.
That's good.
Gretch, I think for those of us with kids in school or who are teachers, definitely September feels like the new year. But I mean, even for people who don't have that, it can be just nice to think of fall as a fresh start.
Exactly. I do love this idea of having a new outfit or a new potted plant as a way to symbolize a fresh start. I think those are both such great ideas for, making you feel like you've turned over a new leaf and there's sort of new energy and a new beginning.
Absolutely.
Well, next up, let's go into a deep dive related to rebels and school.
Shifting my wardrobe from summer to fall is always a challenge. Luckily, Quince offers timeless and high-quality items I adore, ensuring my wardrobe stays fresh and I don't blow my budget. Gretchen, both of us absolutely love Quince's Mongolian cashmere sweaters, which come in so many great colors. My goal for fall is to get the green color that you have.
Yes, Elizabeth, I brought that green sweater on a recent trip together and you were eyeing it. Quince has cashmere sweaters for $50, pants for every occasion, washable silk tops, and so much more. And the best part, all Quince items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands. Make switching seasons a breeze with Quince's high-quality closet essentials. Go to quince.com/Gretchen for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/Gretchen to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/Gretchen. And we're back.
I always love hearing about rebels, Gretchen. They tend to announce themselves.
I always say in the book, The Four Tendencies, rebel is the smallest group of people, but it's the longest chapter because they're the ones that are the most different from the other three tendencies. And I think we really need to have the insight of rebels to help us understand rebels.
Yes.
So enjoy this conversation. And now for a deep dive into rebels and school. So we had two separate questions from listeners that were related to rebels in school. The first question came from a parent who was asking about her daughter, who is a rebel with ADHD in episode 439. And the second question was from a parent who was asking about her son, who is a rebel and who is preparing to go off to college in episode 445.
Yeah, and we're going to combine the answers because several listeners gave combined answers, so it seems like it'd be easier not to split them apart.
Yeah, it got confusing. And one thing we just want to say is ADHD is a huge topic. It's a super important subject. It's specialized expertise. We do not claim that expertise, and these are what listeners wrote. So use your own judgment, consult with your own experts. We don't want to overclaim here.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so Gretchen, this comes from Winslow, who says, in response to the woman who is asking how to support her rebel son who is headed to college, I would offer this advice. Consider whether he may be struggling with ADHD. He sounds like my daughter who has ADHD. She adopts rebel-like attitudes to mask her inability to marshal the executive function required to achieve certain things in life. For instance, if she hasn't followed a rule, she may say to herself and others, that rule is dumb. I'm not going to follow it. But what is really going on is that she didn't have the executive function to follow that rule. She got in trouble and she's masking her shame by claiming to not care about the rule rather than admit the truth. She couldn't bring herself to follow it because her ADHD brain makes that much harder than the typical kids. To further support this idea that perhaps the writer's son is struggling more than he lets on, I'll share this other perspective. As a teacher, I often need to ask myself about a struggling child. Is this a won't situation? The child can do something but refuses, or a can't situation? The child doesn't yet have the ability to do something. Usually, the biggest way to figure out the difference is to give the child plenty of scaffolding and appealing treats and unappealing consequences to avoid, aligned with the target skill. If he or she still doesn't do it, even if the student acts like they're being defiant, we probably have a case of the student not being able yet, as opposed to refusal. But the confusing part is a kid will often act out or say things to make you think they're refusing. However, in my experience, these signs should be ignored if the student has received support and rewards/consequences that they find motivating and they still don't do the thing. This indicates that they simply don't yet know how to do it, no matter what their other actions or words tell you.
Interesting.
Yes, that's really insightful.
Yeah. And then relatedly, Kim, who is an ADHD coach, says, I was thrilled when you asked the listener question about ADHD and rebels on today's podcast. I think this question highlights a really important but misunderstood issue related to managing one's ADHD. It is common for school accommodations to be universal for all students with ADHD, or for suggested strategies to be touted as ideal for everyone with ADHD. But as this listener highlighted, her daughter is a rebel and does not respond well to outer accountability. So the common accommodation of breaking down tasks into smaller chunks actually backfires for her daughter. Many ADHDers, including myself, are obligers. So this strategy can work well for us, but it does not work well for everyone diagnosed with ADHD. As a late diagnosed ADHDer and now a certified ADHD coach, I'm thrilled that this mom has had this realization that her daughter needs accommodations and strategies that are unique for her rebel tendency. I actually use the 4 tendencies framework often in my coaching sessions, as it is so helpful for understanding the role of accountability and helps my client see that people without ADHD may need some of the same strategies they need based on one's tendency. In response to the question, I would advise the mom to create strategies for her daughter that focus first on her rebel tendency rather than centering first on her ADHD. But it is important to not forget about how her daughter's ADHD is also playing a role in the dynamic. So that's somebody who's got a lot of experience.
Yes. Maggie said, I have been a public school teacher for over 10 years, and I recently worked with an elementary student who has ADHD and is also a rebel. She was in my daily small group for struggling readers to work on phonics and decoding. At first, this student was very challenging for me to relate to and to reach. I am an obliger that leans upholder. Many times the student would exhibit defensive and argumentative behavior. I realized how very challenging it would be to have both ADHD and rebel tendencies in a typical school setting. Sit down, stay still, listen to the story, write about the story in your journal. All these tasks are about following instructions immediately and maintaining focus for an extended time. Throughout the year, I got to know her, and the following ideas, inspired by your work on the 4 tendencies, helped a lot. I am pleased to share that at the end of the school year, she had made significant growth in reading. The ideas: choice. I provided choice whenever possible, even with something small. Would you like to stand up or sit on the wobble stool? Do you want to hold the sight word cards, or should I? Consequences. This student loved playing word bingo. When she decided to lay down on the floor instead of read the story, I reminded her that if she did not complete the learning tasks promptly, there would be no time for a game. Identity. This student hated reading at the beginning of the school year. Over the year, I worked with her to try to build her confidence and form an identity as a reader. I acknowledge that reading is a very difficult skill to learn, and it is okay if she doesn't like reading as long as she knows how to read. I showed her data that demonstrated her growth in words per minute on a regular basis. On the last day of group, I caught her sharing her reading growth certificate with her friends. Oh, that's so great.
That's great. Arabella writes, I have 2 sons with ADHD One of them is a rebel. We have found a couple of things helpful. First, his sense of identity is very strong. Once he identified as a clever kid, he was able to focus on academic work, and this really paid off with his studies. When we need him to do something, we have the most success appealing to his identity. It even works when he realizes what is going on. He will sometimes say, "Oh no, don't do this to me. You know I can't resist." I think it's true for many people with ADHD that a looming deadline is important to help them focus, and this is particularly true when it's something they're not interested in. My son leaves everything to the last minute, which drives me crazy. We've realized that he needs this extra drive to get things done sometimes, and no amount of nagging earlier in the week or month, etc., will help him. And instead will trigger both his rebel tendencies and send him spinning off into what we call fizzy behavior, with the inability to settle down to any work or even really hold a sensible conversation without getting distracted. He can't work effectively at all when he's like this. Allowing him to leave his work to the 19th hour has been painful for us, but it's cut down on arguments, and generally he gets his work done. If not, he will suffer the consequences with the school. So that's a little bit counterintuitive, which is let him wait.
Yes.
If it works for him. Ariana writes, "Hi, I'm a rebel and I went to college and did great. I made myself reminder schedules, turned in all my assignments on time, and graduated cum laude with honors. But my whole life, I thought of myself as a good student. Identity. I was never told to do my homework as a child or anything like that. I just did it. Clearly, he doesn't think of himself as a good student, and I can't imagine someone changing his mind. I wonder if college is even the best place for him. I also think that the consequences the mom foresees in his future are overblown. Sure, as an obliger, she may think that the world is fair and just, but the fact is, he may easily skate by on the minimum and do just fine at school and in the workplace. You see it every day." So that's a good reminder. That's sort of the catastrophizing.
Yeah. Don't catastrophize.
Yeah.
Lynn said, "I am a proud rebel. My 26-year-old son is also a rebel. I always seem to get him, whereas my husband, an obliger, found him perplexing. He graduated from a selective college which fit his identity as an achiever. He didn't want to be that guy who is unreliable, nor did he want to be that guy in average classes. In school, he and I linked closely with our identity. I am now getting my doctorate and feeling overstressed, but when my dean told me I would be the first to receive my doctorate and 2 certificates when I finish this May, that was the only challenge I needed. My identity is linked to completing tasks I start. I value and identify with having more than meets the eye or being a hidden treasure." Possibly the mother asking for advice could glean from her son what his goals and values are related to going off to college. Having him set his identity is key.
Back to identity.
Yes.
CMR says, "My rebel brother struggled as an undergraduate. He usually went to class because he enjoys learning, but had trouble turning in assignments. After some semesters with failed classes, my parents figured out a system where he had to front his own money for college, and they would reimburse him for all past classes. This system might help other people. My brother is now working on his doctorate." Okay, that's a good consequences.
Dyer said, "I cannot emphasize this enough. Let him fail. Every rescue attempt by you to save him from natural consequences kicks the lesson down the road. If you don't want to be having these exact worries for him when he's 35, let him do it. The world will be his teacher on this one, not you. That said, I'd read to him exactly what you wrote to the podcast. Let him hear your concern, then let it go."
And we should say, let him fail is in all caps.
Yes.
Many rebels say this. They say you have to let failure happen. That's the best way for rebels. Lauren says, "I'm a rebel with a rebel son. One comment. I remember earlier in an episode you talked about rebels and why praise can be a problem. I find that I like some types of praise, but some praise comes off as surprise that I accomplished anything. For example, my mother will say, 'cool,' or 'it looks good,' but it's in a very chill tone. I appreciate that. My stepmom will say things like, 'good for you,' or 'oh my gosh, that's amazing.' And she says it very loud, like she's astonished. I don't like it because it makes me feel like she thought that I couldn't do something or wouldn't do something. With my son, I try to remind him of consequences sometimes in regards to school. Like I suggest he studies, then remind him, Remember before when you didn't study, then you were stressed during your test and disappointed after you didn't do well. Then after I say the consequence, I leave it alone and let him decide what to do.
Hard as a parent to do that,
Very
but
hard.
often very effective.
It's interesting that so many of these comments are from rebels. They are speaking
Yes.
from the rebel perspective.
It's interesting how many people just say, do nothing is the most effective thing you can do.
Right, or remind them of their identity. Like, what do you want? Because rebels can do anything they decide they want to do.
Yes.
So it's like, help them dial into that. And then consequences. So it's identity and consequences. And understanding how things that work for some people with ADHD might not work for other people with ADHD, which is sort of like a good general rule, which is that no tool fits every hand, but it sounds like it's particularly useful here. One of the most valuable things is that so many rebels wrote in, because I do
Yes.
feel like, because rebel is the most different from upholder, obliger, questioner, I feel like sometimes the other tendencies don't get the rebel perspective. So I was really glad that so many rebels weighed in, because I do feel like they get it in a way that maybe
Yes.
it's hard for even when we understand it. I know for myself, even when I understand it intellectually, it's not the same thing.
It's hard to follow through, but it'll help if I do this, that, the
Yeah.
other thing, even though it won't.
Yeah.
So yes, thank you everybody for
Yes.
those really great suggestions.
One thing that I hear from rebels over and over and over again is let a rebel bear the consequences of their action. Give them the information they need, tell them the consequences of their action or inaction, but then let them make their own decision. Because that is what works for rebels, is if they learn from their own experiences and the consequences that flow. I hear this all the time from rebels.
Yes. So you have an action plan. Do
Yeah.
nothing.
Yes, yes.
All right, up next, we're going to talk about the morning routine, a part of the day that's even more critical during the school year. That is my least favorite part of the school year, is the rush of the morning routine.
I want to let you all in on a little secret. As a family, we used to waste hours a week going up and down the grocery aisles for the best, freshest fruits, vegetables, meats, and still be disappointed. Now we use Fresh Direct. We love Fresh Direct. We save so much time every week. We can grocery shop from the office, from the couch, anytime we want. We've used it for years.
Fresh Direct is farm to kitchen, food sourced directly from farmers, fishermen, and ranchers and delivered straight to your door. For over 20 years, Fresh Direct has been delivering the freshest fruits, vegetables, and meats to the tri-state area. Don't take our word for it. Try it to believe it with $50 off your first order. Go to freshdirect.com and use code HAPPIER. That's freshdirect.com, code HAPPIER for new customers to save $50 on their first order. Terms and restrictions apply. See site for details.
Elizabeth, recently I went to my college reunion, and with two of my roommates, we got an Airbnb right near campus, and it was so fun. It was so fun to stay together. We had a kitchen. We could just hang out in such a comfortable way, and it was so convenient to all the places that we wanted to go. And all of us are really picky eaters, and we could all have our own kind of snacks all loaded up into the kitchen so that we could have exactly what we wanted whenever we wanted it. It just wouldn't have been the same if we had stayed at a hotel. It really added to my whole experience of my reunion.
And also, Gretchen, you don't have to deal with noisy hotel hallways, cramped rooms. You can really tailor it for what you want. This message is sponsored by Greenlight. A new school year is starting soon, and personally, I can't believe I have a 9th grader on my hands. If you're a parent, you want to make this new school year an opportunity for your kids to learn important life skills and continue building independence. For that, I recommend Greenlight.
Greenlight is a debit card and money app for families where kids learn how to save, invest, and spend wisely, and parents can keep an eye on kids' new money habits. Then there's Greenlight's Infinity Plan, which includes the same access to financial literacy education that makes Greenlight a valuable resource for millions of parents and kids, plus built-in safety to give you peace of mind.
Jack has green light, and it was so great that when he was on a trip to Japan, I was able to just keep track of what he was spending, but he felt very much in control of his finances.
Sign up for Greenlight today and get your first month free when you go to greenlight.com/happier. That's greenlight.com/happier to try Greenlight for free. Greenlight.com/happier. We're back, and here are some of our favorite listener hacks. We asked listeners, do people have hacks for making things run more smoothly? Have you figured out something that you're like, okay, this is making my life easier? And we got a bunch of ideas. So listen, let's just rattle through a bunch of them because maybe they'll inspire other listeners to make these changes.
Yes. Okay. Marlo said, I prepare my coffee before going to bed and program it to start being made 5 minutes before my alarm goes off. That way, I wake up in the morning to the sound and smell of coffee percolating instead of a jarring alarm. It's a lovely way to start the day and makes me want to get out of bed to enjoy a cup. It's also one less task for me to do in the morning.
Karuna says, I set an alarm to go off every day at 8 p.m. to remind me to clean the kitchen before going to bed. Whatever I'm doing gets paused when it goes off, and then I return to it after the kitchen gets cleaned up. It's so nice to make breakfast in a clean space.
Kath says, I unpack my bag and repack it for the next day. The space I enter the house has my items I need to set out clearly. In the morning, I just pick up my bag and leave knowing it's all organized.
Creatively Noted said, I walk my dog first thing in the morning with no phone. Exercise plus sunlight plus nature plus quality time with my pup.
Cecily says, I only let my kids eat breakfast and or watch TV in the morning if they are dressed. I won't go into how difficult everything is with our kids, but this is just one non-problem. And at this point, it doesn't ever cross their minds to not get dressed. It is one less battle when we need to leave the house.
Vegas said, once I leave the bedroom in the morning, I'm rarely there again until bedtime. So why was I spending all that time on bed covers and pillows? Get rid of those things.
Christina said, never leave a room without making one thing better. It could be folding a blanket, fluffing a pillow, or picking up one toy and putting it away. All the little things add up over time and only take a few seconds to do.
Well, this reminds me of my 1 minute rule, which I love.
Yes.
I read about in Outer Order, Inner Calm. It's so easy and great. Karen says, I put the things I need to remember in the car the night before, so there's no chance of forgetting them.
I do that sometimes. Joyce said, don't come at me, but I let my kids sleep in the clothes they're going to wear the next day. This is especially helpful if you have one with sensory disorder. Gretchen, one of my best friends in college, Mike, did that for crew. He slept in his crew clothes, so he would get up in the morning.
There you go. Tiffany said, I've recently been changing into workout clothes right when I get home from work. Even if I'm home at 1 p.m. and my yoga class is until 6, I have been 100% successful at working out at night using this method. If I don't change clothes right away, I find the effort of changing to be too much when I am tired at 6 p.m. and don't go at all.
Jennifer said, I could never find time to read development books because I don't want to read those at bed, but I finally started reading a few pages when I walk on the treadmill and I finished my second book. Pairing finally did the trick.
Inger said, get up at 6:45 a.m. instead of 7 a.m. Such a difference 15 minutes makes.
Carlene says, write it down. Ideas in my head fall apart or are forgotten if I don't have them written down. Even if I don't look at it again, it helps me remember my plans if I actually took pen to paper.
Jackie wrote, I play the game of putting away 10 things before leaving for work. Then I come home to a tidy house.
Linda says, when I had several children and several activities, each child had a bag for each activity. That way, the permission slip could go into the dance bag, the uniform in the scout bag, etc. Bags were packed ahead.
Candace said, always stop for gas on the way home as opposed to having to stop in the morning. I never remembered to leave earlier in the morning.
Robin said, clean up kitchen during commercials of our nighttime show. It's like a little game and breaks it up into small tasks. And finally, Jill says, one of my favorite hacks I learned from you, Gretchen, on the Happier podcast. I now get completely ready for bed on the early side around 9 p.m. and then enjoy relaxing, watching TV, whatever, as as soon as I get tired around 11 p.m., I just slip into bed, so happy that I've already brushed teeth, flossed, washed my face, refilled the water glass, etc. I find this makes my personal routine go more smoothly and makes me happy.
I love that hack for myself, so I'm so glad to hear that somebody else found it useful. So these were so great, so fun. They all feel so manageable, but you can see how that little bit more of efficiency could make life easier.
Yeah, I try to get Jack to pack his backpack the night before so we know it's ready to go in the morning. No matter what chaos is ensuing, we can just pick up the backpack.
Yes, because there's never as much time as you think in the morning. And I really work on getting ready for bed well before I want to turn off the light, because I have found that for me, that's a great transition. And if I'm not ready for bed, I am so much more likely to stay up. And last thing, we will leave you with a beautiful reminder of how important teachers are in our lives. This back to school period makes us all think of teachers. This story is about the experiences of renowned actor Steve Carell. Elizabeth, you know I love The Office. Steve Carell played Michael Scott. And also esteemed playwright Adrienne Kennedy. Both of them reflected on the importance of a teacher in the whole shape of their lives. I am a huge fan of the TV show The Office, and I also love the podcast Office Ladies, where Jenna Fisher, who played Pam, and Angela Kinsey, who played Angela, recap the show. On one episode, they interviewed Steve Carell, who played Michael. I was very struck by one story he told. In the episode, they took some questions from listeners, and one listener asked Steve Carell if he remembered a favorite teacher. He answered that he particularly remembered his terrific second grade teacher, Mr. Blackman. Steve Carell credits him as the person who got him interested in acting. In their own classroom, the students were performing a little play, and as part of it, they sat in chairs and mimed that they were paddling canoes. Steve started paddling, and then at some point, he changed the position of his hands to pretend to be paddling on the other side. Steve Carell says, "I'll never forget it. He singled me out. It was the first time I'd ever been singled out in any way, and he gave me a pat on the back. He said, 'Notice how Steve rowed on both sides of the canoe, so he wouldn't go in a circle.'" Steve Carell said that something clicked. Along the same lines, recently I read the brilliant, thought-provoking memoir, People Who Led to My Plays, by acclaimed playwright Adrienne Kennedy. In this unconventional book, Kennedy lists many people who inspired her plays with a few sentences of explanation about each. One of the entries is for Mrs. Folletti. Kennedy writes, "My fifth grade teacher gave me the role of the Virgin Mary in our Christmas play, where I learned the thrill of the attention and interest that came from wearing a costume and standing on stage pretending." In another entry, Kennedy explains that she'd told Mrs. Folletti that she didn't want to be in the school play, but her teacher had insisted. And Kennedy writes, "How glad I was she had insisted." These two teachers helped to change the course of these two students' lives.
Gretch, that is such a beautiful tribute. We have so many teachers who played important roles in our lives.
Yeah. It's great to hear similar stories from other people. It's wonderful. Well, we hope you're feeling more happier after this episode. We had so much fun revisiting these helpful tips and insights and this beautiful reminder of the influence that teachers can have in our lives. We hope all these ideas are useful to you now. And remember, the best time to start a happiness project is 20 years ago. The second best time is now.
Gretch, this back to school season, I am determined to get Jack to go to bed at a decent hour during the week. That's my goal.
How?
I don't know. Probably, a lot of threats.
Yeah. It's not easy. The thing about teenagers, they naturally have that night owl quality. It's like it's part of that age.
I know.
Just like older people are kind of more morning people, teenagers are more night, and it's just hard for them to get up early to go to school.
Yes, well, it's hard for me to get him out of bed.
Right.
Can I give you
Okay.
a tip
Yes,
that's
please.
hard to follow? Is
Yes.
downtime. On your phone, you can select a downtime where the phone goes into timeout mode.
That's great. That's
Thank
great.
you. I'm gonna talk to Adam though about doing that. That's a great idea.
From the Onward Project.